So this is just to put everything into context and what we've been, I think, talking about in some capacity for many years since we were running the agency as well. And I think it's one of the divisive topics that you and I have had.
No, it's
a divisive topic than a colleague and I had that you have now also co-signed on, essentially.
Yeah. I was on your side at that time, but I've grown since then.
You've changed your mind. Let's say it that way. I think grow is like too strong a word, Masang, here.
Yeah.
Changed your mind on this. So just to put it in context and to put like a parameter for this discussion, this is in relation to the two sides that we are on in relation to 90s television commercials of Sri Lanka. I am of the opinion and view that it is ad for ad better in a number of metrics than the advertisements or the commercials of today, and Shashin is of a different or the opposing view to that. Since I am pretty fervent on this,
why don't you go ahead?
Yes, I will start.
Just for the context also, I mean, I think early 2000s commercials, if you don't have to be like 90s, right? Like, there have a few. I think it was the same sort of situation around the early 2000s as well. So if you want to bring up some examples from that time also, that's fine, I would say. It's all good.
Fine. So we are expanding our sort of parameter.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's not a sign. Yeah.
Okay. So to begin, I think the reason why I feel, or rather the context in which I'm suggesting it's better as such, is in relation to the stories and the narratives as opposed to the technology, right? In fact, I think it's the reason for the lack of technology itself that has driven the narrative of the past commercials and what it achieves. The example that I told you yesterday also is that I feel it's better because of the limitations faced by the ECDs, the directors, the clients themselves, limitations in terms of both money, both the amount that's available to be spent, as well as what tech was available and the number of outlets that were actually doing these commercials as well. So whatever money you were spending and whatever effort that you were putting was not sufficient. It's not enough for the return of that to be short term. It needed to be something that in the short term brings in ROI for sure, but in the long term is maintained in the psyche of the consumer in a brand perspective, that you correlate and you relate that to the things, to the product and the brand, the product itself and the brand at large. So if you take commercials like the perennial commercials like the orange barley commercial, or the lemon puff, the Vishishta Balakaya commercials.
Which was in early 2000, I think.
Correct. Or if you take again another early 2000 one, if you take something like the Podi Badaginna campaign. If you take the Stella ads, the Lanka bells. Whenever these commercials came about, I think to this day, decades on, it's memorable primarily because of the narrative. Because the narrative is so memorable to keep going, so that not only does it sell the product or the actual goods at that moment, but it keeps the brand in your mind for much, much longer. The shelf life of a commercial is more, because the consumer, because the client rather, the company might not have had all the resources to put in at that time. So they put everything they have in one go so that it has legs to go across many, many years. And as a result of that, I feel creatives were pushed more to make narratives that last. So that's like an into it. I think we can sort of dive deep into it. But why do you think that is wrong?
For me, it's a weird position to be in and kind of argue this, because I do love those commercials, right? The ones that you said, there's the Gamperli anime, Temperli commercial, right? That's another one.
Polo, yeah.
and then the Bodima commercials. I don't remember if there was
Ninja.
a series of Ninja, right?
Yeah.
So fantastic commercials. I really love them, and I still remember them. It brings a certain level of nostalgia now to you and I. So it's a weird place for me to say, you know what? It's not necessarily because that they were good that we remember them, right? It's a weird place. But what I feel is, I think there is truth to what you're saying as well,
Right.
which is that yes, because of the fact that certain restrictions that they would have had, clients and agencies, they were given, because unlike nowadays, I'm sure even when it comes to production, the equipment would have been a lot more pricey to buy. It wasn't readily available, etc., etc. So if they had to do a commercial, they had to get it done in one go, and it should be good enough to run for a longer period. So, and that is one of the points that kind of supports my argument, and which is that I feel it is not necessarily the fact that the commercials that came after the 2000s and the commercials that we have on our present day are like really bad compared to the ones that were in the 90s. I just feel that we remember the commercials in the 90s and the early 2000s as much better, just because there was the sheer number of commercials that aired those days compared to today were much far less compared to today, and the number of things that really took us away from the TV, the kind of noise that we had those days were compared to today were far less. Now we have phones, we have iPads, computers, everything else that will take us away from a commercial whenever we want. But those days, that wasn't the case. Those days, there would have been a time where we would not mind watching at a commercial, just because our main sort of information center, where we can actually get information in regards of customer goods, products, services, was actually mainly through the TV and the radio, right? So when a commercial does go, you wouldn't mind taking a listen at it. But as time went on, that changed. The amount of information that you could get from was kind of expanding to different outlets. The radio became much more powerful, and of course then became the internet, the social medias, everything. So now you don't need the TV to get that information, and even if you do want it, you don't want to listen to it, right? And don't even get me started on the amount of commercials that you have on air these days. And I feel it is not the fact that the quality, in terms of, you said that the narratives, the story was much better in the executed commercials in the 90s and the 2000s, and that's why we still really remember those things. I'm sure there is a truth to that. But what I feel is that, sure, that might be the case, but maybe the way that creatives had to look at commercials might have changed as well, given the other metrics and attributes that came into the picture. The amount of competitors that you would have on a daily basis for certain products and services.
If I'm real quickly, if I'm to yank the word that you were about to say, that you stopped because it's negative to your argument. It's clutter. Just an FYI.
It's not negative to my. No, on the contrary. On the contrary, what I was going to say was that because the way that we look at commercials would have changed over the years, maybe creatives have to come up with different approaches to get through to the customer. Maybe they realize that there's no time to necessarily tell a bloody story now. We have to get to the point quick and easy, and be done with it. And it's not
that comes to the point, though, Machang, right? So, but by what you're saying, what you also then refer to is that it's mutually exclusive. Catering to what the client wants or catering to what the consumer wants versus a good commercial are oxymoronic. It's two different things. Then What you're saying is that the creative is now catering to the market that's there. Great, no problem. But that doesn't
Yeah.
make it better than what it was before.
No, but that doesn't make your commercials better
No,
than what
so
you're saying as
so
well.
remember the argument is that we
Yeah.
are keeping that as the benchmark regardless. We are not
Okay.
looking at the commercials now and saying are the ones before better. We are working the other way around. So the premise then is the benchmark is the old commercial, and you're comparing.
Well,
it to that.
I would argue, I mean, then we have to look at it in the context of what makes the commercials olden days and the
Agreed.
present days, what makes it better.
I am keeping the metric
why.
as narrative. Exactly.
The why, I know what you're getting at here, but yeah, the why. No, of course. Then the why is that you have to really take in the cultural aspect of it, the environment, the market at that time. It's not necessarily story, I would say. I think that's a skewed sort of place to be
so
in and say.
if I'm to, let's put this into the context of memorability as an example. I agree with you that the environment is such now that you're pummeled with volumes and volumes of commercials, and you have multiple means of disseminating that. You have so many people saying so many things at the same time that it's hard and tough to I'll use the word that you should have used, break through the clutter, right? Cut in the clutter essentially. So I get that. So if that's the context, then the challenge for any creative is to make whatever that is being provided memorable, something that you remember and you refer to.
Memorable, yeah.
But
memorable doesn't equal good story.
Exactly. Like memorable can mean in the modern context a memeable moment, like namak gamak danne හැබැයි හොඳ මිනිස්සෙක්. Right? It just means that it's memorable, sure, but for all the wrong reasons. Yeah.
It's funny that you said that though, like
or the බොමුද සීතල වතුර වීදුරුවක්.
I'm digressing here, but I don't know. There was a time, and I'm sure you did this as well, because if you didn't, then I would be weird. But like, and me and my friends, but like we used to go to school, and like if there was a cool commercial that had a really nice slogan like that, right?
Okay.
Like we would go to school and then we would try to change that slogan into fit like different funny things. I guess that's our 90's way of making memes, I guess. We didn't have like this, so we just say it really like for real.
No, I get you, but now like memorable is like the gotcha factor. Like now they try to do something which creates, and I hate this terminology as well, but a viral moment, rather than really making. It's not memorable in the wholesome sense. I think the last time a modern commercial I saw with a wholesome sense as an advertisement, two commercials actually, and one of which you might not even remember as such. The more memorable one was the Sunsilk commercial. They did the whole 90-second, then cut down to like 45 and 30. Like lower bubble and a ratai ape, like the whole like each person helping each other out and get showered with flowers and the sun. They just
I remember that one.
It's a brand campaign, right?
In
More than anything else,
or something.
Something like that, 2016 or 2017. And the other one is more cultural in nature. It's a Laoji commercial where there's like a interfaith marriage that has happened. Like two religious groups, but the families aren't happy about it, and how the father comes around to it after he sees the girl, bringing tea to her, and like
I remember
tea
that.
brings.
That's a
very hadissi gaman නෑ හිමින් සැරේ ඇවිල්ලා යන්න දෙන්නම් at the end. That's a pure story, that's a pure narrative, and it's
I remember, I think speaking of that, Laoji did a good commercial where I remember, speaking of now, newly married couple, something to do with the newly married couple, and the whole kahata that you have with the mother-in-law.
That's the one. That's the same ad.
Is that the one?
It's the same ad. Yeah, the dad is in the car. He's not. එයාගේ ආරෝය අඩුවක් නැහැ. And that's like that's literally the commercial, right? But I remember it word for word because the story you're watching. We even watch films. We should watch films for story as much as for the spectacle. So like your memorability is in that, the why. So I feel, I'm not saying that it's not there. I'm just saying that it's there, but that's not the focus. And at least to me, in my opinion, the metric that creates a good commercial and a good idea is that narrative in that story. And you can have that. So I don't know. That's where I stand in terms of why I feel in the terms of the previous commercials were better.
No, of course. Look, like I'm into storytelling as well, so it's really weird for me to say, yeah, I disagree with you. So I understand your checkmate here. I understand what you're coming at, but yeah, go on.
You're going against every fiber of your body. It's like I know what you mean, but I don't want to agree with what you're saying.
No, I'm not necessarily agreeing with you, right? I mean, because we are adding the commercial aspect to this thing. This is not a movie. It's not a movie where you need to tell a story to sell the product. I understand the memorability factor. I get that. So I guess if maybe the decision making and the metrics of things in that period of time would have been, in fact, the memorability and actually remembering this is the commercial, because you need that duration, right? You need the legs for it. You're going to run it for a long time, so obviously you need the commercial to be memorable. On the contrary, when it comes to the present day, the metric that you need to be looking at might be how can you cut through the clutter? How good are you at cutting through that clutter? What kind of a point do you have?
But it comes to that point then, right? The only way you can is by having a good story and narrative, which then goes back to the point. It is. Think about it.
No. Well, I mean, the story. See, the point of this is something that I don't really like. These commercials that you see online that are like 5 minutes,
but has no link really to like an end point. I get that. Like that's just for the sake of
my point being that yeah, you can have a fantastic story. Like for example, Dialogue has a new one. I think it's super cliche. I'm hating on Dialogue again. My bad, but like
this is getting personal really, now. But okay.
They make it like they go out of their way to say it's a true story. You know, when you do that, you feel like it seems like a nice story, but I don't know, man. my folks are like, is it actually true? I think they're just faking it.
I think you're referring to like the insurance agent or someone who gets into an accident or something like that, and these two people go,
look, yeah,
like Paula කෙනෙක් වෙන්න ලේ නෑ කමක්ම තියෙන්න ඕනේ and all that jazz.
Yeah, come on, man. Really, like, let that story be. You move on. Try find another way to advertise your shit. Like, come on. Anyway, my point being, the matrix would have changed from those days, whereas now it's not. You don't need to have a story to sell your product, and that's the point of all of this, right? So those days, in order to sell your product, maybe memorability would have played a huge card, but now that card has changed to being the how good at cutting through the clutter and finding that spotlight. That's what I feel.